Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm calling to order this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the Town of Oakville. And Madam Clerk, I know we have regrets from Councillor Robinson, and everybody else seems to be either in place or hobbling in. Welcome, sir. Now, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest, Council? Madam Clerk, I see none. Do we have two members who favor us with a motion to resolve in the Committee of the Whole? Councillor Lapworth and Councillor O'Meara, all in favor? That's carried, and we're now in Committee of the Whole, where we've relaxed the rules so that we can better hear from the public on these planning items. And the first thing I'd like to do, at the request of Councillor Dudek, is turn our attention to item number 14, which is moved by Councillor Dudek, and she believes to be a consent item. Is there any objection? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Mr. Sams and Mr. Sunderland, you're welcome.
Does anybody want to speak to it?
No,
No.
it's a consent item. No one said anything.
Okay.
Now we're going to the rest of the consent items, number 1, 2, and 3. And I'm looking for a motion. Councillor O'Meara is moving the consent items. All in favor? And the consent items are carried. That brings us, and there are no confidential consent items. So now we have our public hearing items, and the first one is the public meeting report for proposed zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision for Graydon Banning Limited on the north side of Dundas Street West across from Proudfoot Trail. And if you give your attention to Mr. Thun from the Planning Department, Rob will summarize the report for the public that the council has already studied. Mr. Thun, we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. That's one hell of, yeah, really. It's going well. The hamsters are running. Let's try this again. Your Worship, if I can get IT here to...
We got off to such a great start.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, these computers are a little old. Okay, yeah, so try reopening it again.
Okay, hold on.
No.
Okay.
Okay, there we
There we
go.
go. Yep.
Got it? Perfect.
Thank you, Mayor Burton and members of council. This is a statutory public meeting for a zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision application submitted by Graydon Banning Limited for their property on the north side of Dundas Street at Proudfoot Trail. The report tonight can be found on page 101 of tonight's agenda. Being that this is a statutory public meeting, the purpose of tonight is to obtain any further public input into the application. Staff will return in the future once the technical review has been finalized with a recommendation report. The slide before council identifies the application area and its context with the surrounding area. To the south is Dundas Street and residential. To the west are vacant lands. A redevelopment proposal has been submitted, and there's also the Infrastructure Ontario lands just further north. To the north of the property is the 16 Mile Creek Valley, and east are the Martillac lands, which is the subject of the next presentation I'll be doing, and the CHWO radio towers. The subject property is designated within North Oakville East and North Oakville West secondary plans. Designations that are applicable are neighborhood area, Dundas urban core area, natural heritage system area, and employment district. And the employment district you'll see is right at the Dundas Proudfoot intersection. The majority of the site is contained within the North Oakville East Secondary Plan, and it is considered as being Neighborhood 14. From a zoning bylaw perspective, the entire property, as is the majority of North Oakville, is zoned existing development, ED, in bylaw 2009-189. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment application proposes to rezone the lands to establish zoning categories within the parent North Oakville zoning bylaw already, with some special provisions, and that is outlined on page 7 of your staff report. The draft plan of subdivision, as you see on your screen, has been submitted for the creation, and this is the original application for 331 residential units, consisting of townhouses and detached units, as well as blocks for employment uses, natural heritage system area, village squares, and also a stormwater management pond. A public information meeting was held on February 7th, 2017. 3 members of the public were in attendance. No concerns were raised. So in conclusion, Your Worship, staff are putting forward the following recommendation for Council's consideration. And once again, tonight's meeting is to obtain any further public input. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for Mr. Thun? Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. The only concern I have is to make sure that we really take a good look at this application with regard to what is proposed to go to the west of it,
Absolutely.
where we are looking at extremely tall buildings, so up to 20, 22 stories, I believe. So you've got to make sure, however this is done, that people moving in realize that things may change to the west from the, what do you say today, the blank open space or something? Yeah, just vacant land.
Well, it's vacant
today.
land at the present time, but we do have application in on it.
Right, so just, I know we're just receiving it tonight. And the only other thing I have is, when you get into page 104, the provincial policy statement, where, and Mr. Thun, this isn't directed, I'm thinking for all of planning, could we just start using the provincial policy statement in part 3 of the provincial policy statement instead of putting all the other words in here? Because they spell it out, and I think it'd be easier, and
Okay.
then there's no misinterpretation too of what we have in the PPS 2014, because it's fully in place now.
I will take that back to the staff.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there members of the public with information for Council on this file? Going once, going twice. Can I have a motion to receive? Councillor Elgar, thank you. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is carried. Let's flip back to the public hearing items. Council, we have a large crowd here, which I believe are here for item number 7. Would everybody be okay with us moving to item 7 for the convenience of the crowd? Is the staff prepared for that? That's what we'll do then. There'll be a little change of file over there.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Welcome back, Mr. Thun.
Thank you, Mayor Burton and members of council. Again, this is the public meeting for an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by 1463291 Ontario Inc., commonly known as Dunbar Developments Inc., for development reflecting 83 residential units comprising of the retention of 2 existing detached dwellings and 81 new townhouses on lands municipally known as 1020 to 1042 6th line. The report can be found on page 137 of tonight's agenda. And for a little bit of background, the application was submitted on October 11th, 2016 and deemed complete October 18th, 2016. The 180-day time frame for a council decision ends prior to the next Planning and Development Council meeting of April 18th, 2017. Following the 180 days, the applicant does have the ability to appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board for a lack of council decision. It is for this reason that staff have brought forth the application or the report to this meeting on the application as submitted. Notwithstanding this, Your Worship and members of council, it is a public meeting. It is being held to provide council with an opportunity to receive any further public input from the members of the public. On the screen in front of you is an air photo and a photograph of the site. The air photo identifies the area and its contacts with the surrounding area. The site consists of the valley lands of the 16 Mile Creek, which is in this, in this area right here, and a tableland area of the 5 lots in this area here. And the tableland area does contain the detached dwellings. 6th line is immediately to the east, right in this location. QEW is to the south. Sunnycrest Lane, which is a private lane, is to the north. And sorry for the cursor problems in this area right here. And the 60 Mile Creek Valley on the site, but the tableland area, as mentioned, is in this location. That tableland area is 1.47 hectares in size. Looking at the air photo, the existing neighborhood north and east of the site, the RL1, RL2 lands, consists of large lots with 1- and 2-story detached dwellings. Mature vegetation does exist within that neighborhood. With regards to 1042 6th line, which is a listed heritage property, not designated, listed, access to the house in this location here is via a long driveway, tree line, and that is the purpose of the second photo, or the photo in the slide. With regards to the specific development application, but before that, a public information meeting was held. It was held on November 29th. 42 members of the public were in attendance, and comments subsequent to that meeting are contained within the staff report, and if I recall correctly, it is Appendix E. With regards to the proposal itself, as I had mentioned, it's related to the retention of 2 existing dwellings. They are the 1020 in this location here and 1042 in this location here. 75 traditional townhouse units and one block of 6 back-to-back townhouses, and the back-to-back is in this location with the blue arrow, for a total of 81 new townhouse units on the subject property. Access would be via 2 proposed driveways shown by the red stars. The roads are proposed for future condominium roads, excuse me. An emergency connection is shown onto Sunnycrest Lane by the yellow star. Sunnycrest Lane, as I mentioned, is a private roadway. It is not a municipal street. The plan does identify the stake Tapa bank from Conservation Halton. It does identify the geotechnical stable Tapa bank and a 15-meter buffer. These limits, however, have not been accepted to date by the Region of Halton or Conservation Halton. All proposed new development is situated outside the 15-meter Tapa bank buffer. The existing dwellings, as I had mentioned, 1020 and 1042, are contained within that buffer, though. The proposal as submitted requires the removal of approximately 80% of the existing trees from the tableland area. So 80% of the trees in this area are proposed to be removed. The comprehensive environmental impact assessment is targeted for completion in July of this year. A heritage impact assessment was submitted and reviewed by staff. It was determined to be deficient in the cultural heritage landscape component, and it also does make reference to the potential for consideration of 1042 being a Part 4 heritage designation. From the official plan perspective, the tableland area within the site is designated low-density residential with a special policy overlay. This overlay reflects a maximum density of 10 units per site hectare, and a portion of the property is also designated as natural area. Section 26.2 of the Livable Oakville Plan states that the special policy area is intended to protect the unique character of that area. And for everyone's information, the official plan amendment as submitted proposes the following: to redesignate the developable area, which is the tableland area, from low-density residential with special policy to medium-density residential, to remove the special policy area overlay, which reflects the 10 units per site hectare, to permit a maximum density of 56.5 units per site hectare, and to redesignate the top of bank setback from natural area and private open space with permissions for the existing dwelling and structure to remain. From a zoning perspective, you have both the existing zoning and the proposed zoning. The applicant is proposing or seeking site-specific permissions to reflect the development that I just outlined. Specifically, the zoning bylaw amendment proposes to rezone the development area from residential low RL1-0 and natural area to residential medium RM1 and RM2 and private open space O2. With each zone, there would be specific regulations to permit the proposed redevelopment of the site. The proposed RM1 reflects the traditional townhouses. The RM2 would reflect the back-to-back units. The O2 would reflect the top of bank area associated with the existing dwellings that are proposed to remain. And N generally reflects the valley lands. So as you can see from the proposed, this is the traditional, this is the back-to-back. This area here reflects the area of the two existing dwellings, and natural area is generally the valley land. So staff undertook an assessment of the application both from a policy and a technical perspective. In that assessment, concluded that the proposal introduces a built form, narrow townhouse units on a private condominium lane and a density that doesn't adequately respond to the surrounding neighborhood or the low-density residential designation. With the special policy area overlay that limits the 10 units per site hectare. Instead, the application introduces a built form with a density permitted in a high-density residential designation. The proposed designation, as mentioned previously, is calculated at approximately 56 units per site hectare. This reflects a high-density designation, and the high density for council's information is generally 51 units per site hectare to 185 units per site hectare. The maximum density for medium residential is 50 units per hectare. The proposal does not adequately respond to the evaluation criteria contained within section 1119 of the Livable Oakville Plan. The overarching policy goal of that is to maintain and protect the existing neighborhood character. The existing neighborhood character is comprised of single detached dwellings with mature vegetation situated on large lots on public roads. From a cultural heritage perspective, as I had mentioned, 1042 is a listed heritage property. The heritage value of the existing heritage property at 1042 and the possible cultural heritage landscape features requires further examination. If they are deemed to be worthy of protection, then how would they be integrated into any potential development of the lands? That has to be analyzed. A private road is proposed to service the development. The official plan does discourage the use of private roads. The completion of the EIA is required in accordance with the defined terms of reference that have been approved by Conservation Halton and Halton Region. It's anticipated the completion date is July of this year. A significant amount of tableland trees is proposed to be removed from the site, including the south side of the double row of trees along the northerly edge of the property. That is the photo that I had shown you on the alley going into 1042, the 6th line. And there are other mature stands and clusters of trees on the site also proposed to be removed. Access onto Sunnycrest Lane is also an issue that in its entirety for the full development. The transition of any development of the subject lands with the lands to the east or to the south has to be analyzed. Delineation and disposition of the defined top of bank area and the valley, satisfactory Conservation Halton, Town of Oakville, and Halton Region needs to be reviewed. The top of bank acquisition policies, it's been a long-standing policy that when valley lands are defined, the top of bank setback is traditionally conveyed to the town. In this case, it is proposed to be private open space. So that also has to be reviewed in its totality. And if you were to walk the site, there's also noise attenuation measures, as the noise on the property is quite a bit. So, in conclusion, staff are recommending refusal of this proposal as submitted, which introduces a built form at a density that does not protect or maintain the existing neighborhood character and does not reflect the town's urban structure. As mentioned, staff are putting forth the following recommendation for your consideration, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Thun. I wonder if you could take us to page 175 of the agenda, which may or may not be, let me see here. Anyway, the first, it's the Conservation Halton recommendation. I just want to read it. Conservation Halton finds the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment to have been submitted prematurely, as the constraint limits cannot be supported in absence of a completed and approved environmental impact assessment, and additional information is required in order to support the geotechnical assessment and location of the long-term stable top of bank. Staff also require further discussion and evaluation of the proposed zonings for the site. And the reason I call your attention to it and ask you for comment is they use the word submitted prematurely. Would you agree with their assessment?
Well, part of the application or pre-consultation was the submission of an environmental impact assessment. Components were submitted, but not a complete EIA. So in the absence of a complete EIA, it's difficult for Conservation Halton staff to do a full assessment.
And nevertheless, the application was declared complete and the clock began running.
Yes,
And if we wait any longer, we'll be in a de novo hearing at the board instead of a hearing of our decision. Is that correct?
correct.
Okay, thank you. Council, do you have questions? Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. That was one of them. Just to expand on a little bit further, why would the application be considered complete if the reports and the studies were not adequate? In terms of Conservation Halton is indicating that it's premature, that there wasn't, that the study was not complete. Why would the application be considered complete if that were the case?
It was deemed complete considering the information that was submitted when I looked at the information itself. When the information was submitted out to the Conservation Halton, it wasn't sufficient.
So was it Conservation Halton that noted it as being incomplete?
Yes.
And that wouldn't trigger an incomplete from our point of view?
The notice had gone out that deeming it complete already.
Before Conservation Halton had provided their
The
comments?
application is submitted to staff. Staff deemed the issue complete or not complete. And by the time it was made my attention, the information, sorry.
Okay, sorry. Yep, I'll wait for the
Well,
Direct manager.
perhaps the planning director can help us, but as I understand it, maybe this is where you're, I'll wait and see where you're going, Mr. Planning Director, instead of telling you where you're going.
Through your worship to Councillor Knoll. So in dealing with complete applications, the test is not the quality of the work that's there, but rather do we have reports that reflect the matters that were discussed during the pre-consultation process. So for example, if we had said we need environmental impact assessment and one's present, the review of that information is what comes after. So it's in the sense that the document was presented, then there's an ability to declare it complete. And this becomes a matter of judgment sometimes because it's how far do you get into the substantive elements of the report versus the reports here. So it's not an assessment of the quality of the work, but the fact that the work has been provided.
Right, and that allows me to remind everyone, this is one of the reforms we're looking for from the government on the Ontario Municipal Board, is an enhanced ability to say, you can't just give us a piece of paper that's called a report, it's got to actually deal with the things, right?
Well,
So
this is a
we
great-
want-
yeah.
We want the ability to say it's not good enough, but we don't have that
It's a
yet.
great example to back up what you're saying, absolutely. But in this particular case, the Conservation Halton was saying that if the documentation was submitted was premature, that to me is not just a qualitative issue, it sounds like it's a quantitative issue as well, that they didn't have sufficient documentation. At any point in time at Conservation Hall, I mean, I'm sorry to be splitting hairs here, I'm just trying to understand this because,
I think it means they did not anticipate, they may not have dealt with Conservation Halton before.
the developer, the applicant?
It's possible that they're not familiar with the rigor with which Conservation Halton treats applications.
Okay, I'll move on from that. I think I've got the answer I was looking for there, so thank you for that. you did indicate during the presentation that the Stapletoppa Bank was not accepted by the region or Conservation Halton. We've just talked about Conservation Halton's issue. Was the region's lack of support, is that simply a matter of timing? They didn't have a chance to review it, or do they have objections to it?
Halton Region, sorry, Your Worship, through you, Your Worship, to the councillor. The information that Conservation Halton and the region look at are similar in nature. They look at it from a different policy perspective.
So when you say that it was not accepted, because those are your words, by the region or Conservation Halton, are you saying that it was not accepted in terms of, it wasn't accepted because they didn't have sufficient time to analyze it? They didn't have sufficient information, or they simply rejected
Those topics are incorporated into the forthcoming EIA report. And with the approval of that document, should it be submitted, then the Toppa Bank, the geotechnical Toppa Bank, and the associated buffers would be solidified.
So it sounds like this is a timing issue then as well.
Timing.
Okay. In terms of 1042, in your presentation, you indicated that 1042, which is the house of interest with respect to historical context, you said that that was to be retained in the developable site, correct? Or in the development proposal?
1042 and 1020 are proposed to be, to remain.
Right. So they're to remain, but 1042 is the one that you have, that you indicated there's a heritage issue, a heritage interest in that house.
Correct. There is a heritage interest in that house as the town has listed it from a heritage perspective.
So doesn't the fact that it's being retained already negate that concern, or is there an additional heritage issue that has to be addressed over and above the structure itself?
Over and above, there is a cultural heritage landscape that also needs to be reviewed, and how the heritage building may or may not be impacted by this development. How there's another property on Sunnycrest Lane that has, is listed. There should be a review of that with regard to this development and any impacts of this development to that property also.
So there's a big contextual issue all around.
Correct.
Okay. The valley lands themselves, so there's a substantial portion of the valley lands. Actually looks like a piece of it touches Ward 4 when I look at the map. Looks like maybe it spans both wards. It hops the creek. What happens to those valley lands when, at some point, if this were to be developed? What happens to those? Do they get deeded to us? Are they given to us as part of the parkland dedication?
That would be the expectation, that those valley lands would come into town ownership, similar to other development applications.
So at this time, Dunbar and then theoretically whoever the owners were previously owned that entire portion right down almost to Kerr Street, it appears.
Correct.
Wow, I had no idea. So but at some point that would become our land, supposing an application where at some point to be approved for our conservation or use thereof.
That would be the expectation, yes.
Okay. That's all I have at the moment. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Elgar, how did I know?
No, I think Councillor Knoll did a very good job of pointing out all the errors. I just wondered whether you might consider explaining to the people in the audience what a de novo hearing is. I think there's an awful lot of people out there that wouldn't know what you're talking about, so if you wouldn't mind, I think it might help them.
There's two ways a matter can wind up in front of the board. One is for council not to make a decision, and the other is for the council to make a decision that the applicant disagrees with. Either way, you get appealed to the board. If you've made a decision, then the board is supposed to look at your decision, and that becomes the case that's being tried, is did you make a good decision? And if you haven't made a decision, it's sort of like the board takes over in place of council and does the planning exercise. And one of the criticisms I've had of the board in that circumstance, one of the reasons I don't like de novo, or as if from the start, is another way of interpreting de novo. One of the reasons I don't like those is that I don't think the public gets as much opportunity for input at the board as they do at council. So, I also believe, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm only giving you my civilian perception of this, but I believe that we're in a stronger position when we're defending our decision rather than arguing with the board to make a decision the way we would like. So, for those reasons, I tend to support us making decisions and defending our own decisions rather than putting it all in the lap of the Ontario Municipal Board. Is that good enough? Any objections to that description from council? Hey, I may have actually gotten, there are learned counsel in the audience, and some of them are smiling, they may even be laughing. I won't ask them what they think of my explanation. But our own solicitor hasn't leaped up to correct me, so I may not be that far wrong. Now, are there other members of Councillor Grant?
Councillor Knoll caught most of the questions that he and I both had, but in regards to the trees and the arborist report, we're looking at a series of healthy, mature trees on that property, yes?
Yes, we are.
Okay, and when we had the landscape plan returned to us, which I assume is one of those checklists that we needed, how are we going to be replacing the canopy?
Well, that is an issue that needs to be resolved, but first and foremost, tree preservation on the site has to be looked at in detail. As I had mentioned in one of the slides, the LA into 1042 6th line needs to be looked at thoroughly from not only a tree perspective, but also from a cultural heritage landscape perspective. So things like that, tree protection, before we even get to the landscape. Any development of the site, hypothetically, this one right here, would have to go through site plan. And we were dealing with it through site plan.
Okay, precisely. Great, and I think, yeah, Jeff asked that too. All right, perfect. As far as the heritage property goes, I'd invite any members of council, now the weather's almost better, to grab a bike and ride down that lane. It's beautiful, the trees over top, and the house at the end of the property. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. All right, Council, I propose to open the meeting to the delegations who appear to have gathered here tonight for this purpose. But before we do, Mr. Thun, I just wonder one last question from council. It struck me as I listened to you, you crystallized something that I had thought when I was reading the report earlier. This application feels like it wants to pretty much set aside our official plan. The marginal note I wrote in the report was very little regard for our official plan here. Is that something that you would agree with?
The introduction of an OPA and a zoning bylaw amendment to redevelop the land does introduce then the policies and objectives of the town's livable plan, protecting and maintaining the character of the existing neighborhood. And those are things that we do have to look at. So yes, it opens up a discussion once you do an OPA.
All right. All right, Madam Clerk, would you call the registered delegations? And after that, after we've heard from the registered delegations, we will poll the audience to see if anything has been left unsaid. Is that all right with everybody? Okay, Madam Clerk.
Our first delegation this evening, speaking to this item, is David Long.
Welcome, Mr. Long. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Town Councillors. My name is David Long, and I live on Rancliffe Road, which is located immediately north of this proposed development on 6th Line. I would like to make a brief presentation to the Council tonight on behalf of the residents of the community that immediately surround this area. I represent almost 200 people in this community who are opposed to this development, almost 200 people. Many have long-term roots in this neighborhood. We have canvassed 100 houses in the immediate vicinity of this development. We have canvassed 6th Line, Sunnycrest, Rancliffe, Regency, Jermorda, Beaumorda, and some on Leyland. Only 2 houses were in favor of this development, and one house believes there's no point trying to fight City Hall. This means that over 95% of the households that we have contacted in the area, or almost 200 people, are opposed to this development. As a show of support against these proposed amendments and concern for the well-being of their community, I am pleased to report to Council that 50 people from the community have turned out tonight and signed their names in opposition. and I want to thank them for turning out tonight. I can provide this information to the clerk. Unfortunately, given their busy schedules and other commitments, not all the people have been able to stay at this time. Since there is overwhelming neighborhood opposition to this proposed development, we, the residents of the community, ask that the members of Town Council follow the recommendations of the Planning Services Department report and reject the proposed application for amendments to the official plan and zoning bylaw by 1463291 Ontario Incorporated. There are many reasons, both macro and micro, why the community opposes this project. So I'd like to take a few minutes to just highlight some of the macro reasons why this proposed development is out of character to the neighborhood and to the town itself, and why it is not compatible with the objective of a livable Oakville. Firstly, this proposed development is too close to the QEW. The closest townhouses are only 40 meters from the roadbed of the QEW, and 70 townhouses out of 81, or 85% of all the units in the development, are within 150 meters of the QEW. By reviewing the satellite maps on Google and confirming with the aerial photographs on the town's website, our community around the 6th line is the only residential community in Oakville that is within 200 meters of any of the major highways, QEW, the 403, and the 407. Now, there appear to be at most a handful of houses slightly closer than 200 meters in the whole town, but these are for the most part older and isolated houses and not part of a neighborhood community, such as I believe there's a house on the South Service Road between Burloak and Bronte. There's a farm up on 6th line at the 407, and there possibly is one on the around the 3rd line intersection. But based on my observations, all the other houses in all the other residential communities in Oakville have a buffer zone of at least 200 meters from the pavement of those major highways, as compared to this proposed development, which starts at 40 meters and has the majority of its townhouses less than 150 meters. Truly an exception. We believe that this proximity, along with the accompanying noise and pollution of a busy QEW, is out of character, not only for our neighborhood, but for the whole town of Oakville. In fact, the high level of expected noise is significant in itself and is the second major reason why our community believes that this application for development should be rejected. While there is a partial sound barrier along the QEW, there is no sound barrier on the 16-mile Creek Bridge for traffic in both directions, or along Kerr Street on the other side of the valley. And therefore, much of the proposed development is directly exposed to the noise from the heavy highway traffic. Normally, this noise is partially mitigated by the natural absorption from the trees and hedgerows on the property, but these are planned to be eliminated under this plan. Now, the noise assessment report indicates that the sound barriers indicates that sound barriers have a negligible effect, B, that the predicted sound will substantially exceed both the Ontario provincial and Halton regional standards, and C, that air conditioning and substantial material upgrades will be required to the townhouses so that inside sound levels will be acceptable, and this only happens when the windows are closed. The closest units in the development will be subject to sound levels on their outdoor decks of 76 decibels. Now, if you Google how loud is 76 decibels, according to my research, vacuum cleaners average 70 decibels, and sound between 75 and 79 decibels is considered annoyingly loud to some people. This is the level of sound that will be experienced. The conclusion is that you need to live indoors all year round with the windows closed and the AC or furnace on, otherwise most of the townhouses don't meet the provincial and regional noise standards. A third major reason why our community opposes this project is that it plans to remove over 180 trees and most of the hedgerows from the tableland area. While the removal of trees is noted in the Planning Services Department and Arborist report, I can find no mention regarding the removal of the mature hedgerows, which are integral to the specific properties and also to the larger neighborhood. These beautiful mature trees and mature cedar hedges provide natural sound absorption to the community, since they are the first line of defense against highway traffic noise. The taller trees serve to provide resting places for hawks and other birds, while the hedgerows provide protection for smaller birds and animals. There is significant wildlife in the community that depend on this natural growth. The entire community is noted for its mature trees and vegetation, and therefore substantial clear cutting of the tableland under this proposed development would be out of character to the neighborhood. In addition, Town Council has expressed its intention to review the tree preservation bylaw, and furthermore, the town's objectives regarding tree preservation would appear to be inconsistent with this development. In addition, the community also opposes any plans to alter the majestic character of the driveway, which has been mentioned, leading to the historical house at 1042 Sixth Line, which is lined by tall trees. So they're going to remove over 180 trees on the top of the tableland. This driveway is a unique feature of the characteristic, and I also encourage everybody to stop by and see it. And we saw a photo of this driveway in Figure 4 of the planning report. The fourth macro reason why our community opposes this application is because the development, specifically the build form, is out of character with the rest of the neighborhood, as noted in the Planning Services Department report. The scale, height, and density of the townhouses are foreign to the surrounding neighborhood. The townhouses are 4 stories tall. Some of the houses in the neighborhood are 2 stories tall. Most of them are bungalows, 1 story. This is not consistent. They are not consistent, and they do not blend in. The land is a special policy area designation with a maximum density of 10 units per hectare. The amendment proposes to increase that by 5.5 times to 56.5 units per hectare. This is extreme density, and it's far out of character for this neighborhood. There are a myriad of other reasons why we oppose this application, including the high potential for both internal and external traffic congestion in the area. But I've highlighted only a few significant examples for this presentation to limit our time. And to sum up the reasons, number 1, extreme proximity to the QEW. Number 2, very high sound levels. Number 3, clear cutting the trees and hedgerows, which is out of character to the neighborhood. And 4, the build form, which is also out of character to the neighborhood. And finally, a quick story. 55 years ago, my grandparents came to Oakville to retire. They were looking at a property on Rancliffe Road when my grandmother saw a blue jay in the tree cackling away. Because of this, she decided she wanted to live here, and she told my grandfather to buy the property. To her, this represented the character of the neighborhood, quiet and very natural, where the houses blended into the environment. Our community wants to preserve this neighborhood and its character, but this proposed development does the opposite and eradicates it. By the way, the story has a happy ending, as my grandparents lived happily ever after in this neighborhood. The residents of our community request the Town Council to follow their staff's planning advice and reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you for your information, Mr. Long. Before you run away, I need to compliment you on the incredible piece of timing. You had 3 seconds left. We would have let you go on. We always do, but nevertheless.
Thank you. I had it at 7.5 minutes. But.
Apparently you may have rehearsed. Councillor Knoll has a question for you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your presentation. I just want to ask a question with respect to, you went through a list of 4 well thought out reasons why you and your colleagues are opposing the application. And inevitably, council tonight is more than likely going to follow the staff's recommendation and reject the application as it sits right now. It's going to come back, no question, through the Ontario Municipal Board, and there'll be some sort of future consideration for this property. Have you given any thought to what you would like to see happen to this property in the future? If you were to have your druthers, because inevitably there will be, there are as of right development conditions on the property. There are homes that are within that that buffer zone that you talk about already that are there. What would you like to see happen on this property in the future?
Well, I've had some discussions with a number of people, and the comments are, in the wisdom of council, that you have an official plan and you should stick to it. And we're not opposed to, I mean, the houses have been left to deteriorate there. We're not opposed to something being done, but within the context of the official plan, and also within the situation of the trees and the hedgerows, we are certainly open towards development within those priorities. Those are constraints that we have, and I don't think you would find, I think you would find some acceptance for a reasonable single-family homes fitting within the property.
As if this were a perfect segue to my next question, one of the things that Councillor Grant and I had discussed with staff is a possible additional clause which would ask staff, notwithstanding the fact it probably will end up at the Ontario Municipal Board, but that staff undertake an investigation and consultation with local residents and the applicant to brainstorm what could potentially happen with that site. If we were to propose that, and if it were to be accepted by our colleagues along with the balance of this recommendation, would that be something that you and your neighbors would be willing to participate in, to provide that kind of feedback?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I have a detailed contact list of the people in the neighborhood.
Just one point I just want to make. The good news will be that you mentioned that the houses have been left derelict. I know that one of them was just recently rented, so I think that they're trying to be sensitive in terms of making sure that we don't end up with what typically happens in North Oakville, where the houses go empty and they burn down. So fortunately, I think developers have been very responsible in actually finding some tenants to occupy those homes for the time being, which is good news.
If there was a fire in the neighborhood.
Pardon me?
If there was a fire in the neighborhood, you're going to have a lot more than one house that's going to go up
Yeah,
in
well, I
flames.
understand that. We don't want that to happen at all, period. So I just
Absolutely.
want to point out, because you had mentioned that they've been left to go derelict.
Yes.
I realize.
Which is unfortunate.
But one is occupied, one was just recently occupied, and I'm not sure, hopefully, I know the 1042 is occupied, so I think there's only 2 that remain unoccupied, and hopefully the developer will move towards doing something about those for the short term so that we don't have that kind of situation in the community.
Yes, I think that's a good
Thanks
idea.
again for your, and hopefully if that additional clause passes, look forward to your participation in that.
We'd very much like to participate in any plans, future developments of the area.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Long.
Thank you very much, sir.
Councillor Elgar?
Just want to summarize what Mr. Long said. So, Mr. Long, you are saying that you agree with 100% with the staff recommendation, and you agree with the official plan and the current zoning on the property?
Yes, I do, sir. Yes,
Thank you.
Yes, we do, sir.
Thank you. You are speaking for
Almost 200 people, yes.
I thank you.
In the
Thanks.
community.
Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The next delegation to this item is Vittorio Camboni.
Welcome, sir. Council looks forward to your information.
Mr. Chairman, member of council, I am not a very good speaker,
If we could get your,
but
if we could get you aimed at the microphone,
Oh, I'm sorry.
everyone will be able to hear you, and they'll be able to tell you afterwards that you were better than you think.
Mr. Chairman, member of council, as I said, my speech is not very good, but I've been on Sunnycrest Lane for the last 44 years, which is quite a while. And I do believe that some changes probably will have to be accommodated at a later date. But now I think I support the refusal to this particular development because it's way over what the area demands. So that's about all I can say. You know, that's a very short speech, but
They say that the shorter you speak, the more eloquent everybody thinks you are.
yeah.
Just let me ask if Councillor Knoll has a question for you. He's your ward councillor, or Councillor Grant.
Well, I'm one of them. I don't have any more questions, Your Worship. I
right.
think we
Thank you, Councillor Grant.
let this move on.
I know our fair resident from Sunnycrest Lane very well. Thank you for coming out today, and thank you for speaking.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Camboni. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The next listed delegation is Russell Cheeseman.
Welcome, Mr. Cheeseman. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. My name is Russell Cheeseman. I am the solicitor for Dunbar Developments. I have been recently retained on this matter. A matter of days ago, I was retained because my client called me and said, I think we're going to the Ontario Municipal Board, and we might need your services. We're having a report written that's going to turn us down. So I got involved, read the report when it came online. I've had a look at it, and I have got some concerns with the process that we're going through here this evening. We're here, as I understand it from Mr. Thun's presentation, that staff felt that there was an immediacy to write a report to turn us down because the 180-day time frame was running on in the Planning Act. Now, the Planning Act time clock gets punched on when the town of Oakville says you've got a complete application. My client got punched in. Time started to run. We have a complete application. I heard that from Mr. Thun tonight that there are heritage issues on this property, that a heritage impact assessment was provided. But it's interesting, no heritage impact assessment was requested as part and parcel of the complete application process. An EIS was requested. A full EIS has not yet been completed because, as everybody in this room knows, a full EIS takes at least a year to complete because you've got to do all 4 seasons to have that happen. My client has applied for an official plan amendment, policy document, and a zoning bylaw amendment. It sets out a range of density, et cetera, on the property. We have yet to apply for a plan of subdivision, a plan of condominium, and a site plan that I believe this project has to go through as well. Those applications are going to be forthcoming because we have to put a complete application, a complete development application together for your perusal and for your staff's perusal. I can say that my client tells me that there are comments that are contained in this report that the first time they got wind of them was the time that they were put in this report for a refusal. Haven't had any chance for the normal give and take that goes back and forth for plans to be thought about. What's up on the screen there right now is a proposed development plan, and I mean for all the proposed development plans I've seen in my lifetime, I mean that proposed development plan and $5 will get me a coffee at Starbucks, but there's no official plan of subdivision in, and no plan of condominium yet in to review the types of things that we're talking about, tree retention. Can the development be accommodated to deal with noise concerns? All that's yet to come. That's all going to come down the pipe. So I'm trying to understand, and believe me, for a developer lawyer to be saying, I don't understand what the rush is, in this instance, I really don't understand what the rush is. Because the applications that the developer has yet to put to you aren't full. And I can tell you as a lawyer who does a lot of Ontario Municipal Board work, I would never say to my client, take the official plan and zoning bylaw to the Ontario Municipal Board without anything else. If you turn us down in this report tonight, my client will have no alternative but to file for an appeal. And we'll file an appeal. And the board will give us a file number, and we'll sit and wait for everything else to happen. Because I'm not going to go to the board on a zoning and an OP without a plan of subdivision, a draft plan of subdivision, and a site plan. So it's all one package so you can see what the development is at the end of the day, and it can all be analyzed at one point in time. So for life of me, I don't know why we're being pushed to the point where you're saying we're going to refuse you, because here's the position to put you in. You're going to refuse me, I'm going to appeal it. I show up in, I don't know, a month and a half from now or 2 months from now with a full, complete list of new documents for the plan of subdivision, what can you do for me? You can't approve it. You've already turned down the official plan and zoning bylaw. You can't even consider it. So, I mean, you turn me down quickly and just say, well, I'll take your money, thanks very much. We'll write a quick report telling you, no, thanks, it doesn't comply with the official plan. Well, we know that. I mean, duh, right? It's an official plan amendment. We've got before you. For the planning staff to say it doesn't comply with the official plan, boy, that's a shock. It's an official plan amendment. The analysis under the PPS, the analysis on, not in this report. I heard the mayor's concerns about the idea that somehow, if we go to the Ontario Municipal Board, it's better to go on a de novo rather than appeal. This matter is going to the Ontario Municipal Board on an appeal. It goes on an appeal because of council's refusal, or it goes on an appeal because of council's neglect. But we're not in a rush to appeal this to the Ontario Municipal Board. Because we're not going to, I guarantee you, we're not going to get to the Ontario Municipal Board without everything being there. So I don't know why council wouldn't table this report this evening. Take it, receive it, table it. Allow the process to continue. Allow us to make the applications that'll come in. Allow us to have the discussions with the various members of your staff, regional staff, Conservation Halton. I mean, when you look at the regional comments, the regional official plan doesn't, the regional planning authority doesn't say, this doesn't comply with the regional official plan. It says, it's premature. We haven't seen the EIS. We haven't confirmed the line. Conservation Halton, surprise, surprise, it's exactly the same thing. We don't know where the line is yet because the 4 seasons haven't been done yet. It's coming. We can't make the clock run any quicker than we can. We've got to do all 4 seasons on that EIS. The heritage study, they say, well, it's a bit deficient. Well, it's funny to me that you're saying my HIA is insufficient when you didn't even ask me for one. My client gave it to you because we thought it would be of interest to you. But it will have to be one done for the plan of subdivision, for sure, and the plan of condominium. And all those things, staff would say, wrap it up, get it in there, make sure it's complete. And there would be discussions back and forth. If you do this tonight, I think you're going to just stop that process dead. There won't be that discussion. And what's that going to lead to? That's going to lead to 2 years of delay, going to the Ontario Municipal Board for a very expensive hearing with no input from staff back and forth, because how can staff possibly analyze my plan of subdivision when council's told them the OPA and zoning bylaw goes along with it, turn it down? They can't say to you, how can we possibly approve the plan of subdivision? They can't. All I can tell you is it doesn't comply with the official plan. Well, that's why we have an official plan amendment for you, so that you can look at the whole thing comprehensively, understand it, and make a valid, sound planning decision. That's what council, I think, wants to do. They want input from the public. They want input from everybody who can give them input to make a made and no-field decision. Here's your chance to make a made and no-field decision. You make this decision in this report and take this recommendation, you're moving it outside your jurisdiction because there's no other way to deal with it. Those are my submissions to you this evening, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Cheeseman. Are there questions for Mr. Cheeseman? Thank you, sir, very much for your time. Now, I promised I'd poll the audience in case something had been left unsaid. Are there any other members of the public with information for council on this matter? Right, then I'll confine it to table, and I'll look, Councillor Knoll.
Well, since you're confining it to table, I do have a question of staff, and my question of staff, and I'm not sure if they can answer this in public session or whether we'd have to go in camera, but I would like to hear staff's response to Mr. Cheeseman's comments, because I too share some concern about basically handing the entire planning file over to the Ontario Municipal Board, which has been my concern about. I've already expressed this to staff before. And I'd like to hear their response to Mr. Cheeseman's specific concerns. And again, I don't know if we can do that publicly or whether we have to do that in camera in light of the potential pending Ontario Municipal Board hearing.
Mr. Solicitor. Maybe I could help you with a suggestion, Mr. Solicitor. I don't know that we'd have to go into camera to consider the question, was the applicant free at all times to submit the other parts of the package that have not been submitted, that the counsel for the applicant mentioned, being the plan of subdivision and so on, the site plan?
Yes, Your Worship.
Sorry. Just again to staff, at any point through this though, was there discussion with staff, and this might be an in-camera one, discussion with staff that we wouldn't really have to jump on the 180 days, that we could negotiate extra time, given the fact that there might be some things outstanding?
Through your worship, so if I'm understanding correctly, Councillor, you're asking if we thought we could negotiate extra time. It's a right conferred by the Planning Act and not something that staff can negotiate. We did suggest that if more time was necessary, it may be appropriate that the application be withdrawn to provide us that opportunity to have that further dialogue. This was in light of our attempt to have council be in the position of making the decision. So the offer was placed to the applicant to consider withdrawal, and we could regroup and look at what could potentially go forward on the site without this 180-day timeframe.
So an olive branch was put out, but it wasn't accepted.
The olive branches, not the descriptions, those are my words. I would suggest that we respectfully suggested that they consider withdrawing so that we could continue the dialogue in the manner described.
This would have the effect of resetting the clock. So, Council, Councillor Knoll, I'm inclined to support your additional, the addition you floated earlier to the resolution, but I do support the staff report.
Can I add one last piece, one last question, then I will allow you to move on, or not that I have the right to allow you to do anything, but I'll shut up at that point. My further question is with respect to this 180-day thing. If I understand that the desire is to reset the clock so that there's no, I guess, clock ticking, or there's another 180-day clock ticking, but if this is going to go to the OMB anyway, then what difference does it make if we reset it now, or we just simply keep negotiating, rather than making everybody go back to their starting points? The difference is whether it goes to the board or not. If the clock is reset, there's 6 months in which all these different pieces can be done, and these neighborhood investigations can be done. I understand that, but why couldn't that have happened while the application was still alive, so that the developer could be an active participant in those discussions?
The developer can be an active participant either way. The question is only whether or not we're subject to the jeopardy of being appealed on the expiry of the current 180 days. That's the only variable here.
Okay, so let me just answer.
So they didn't want to lose their ability to take this to the board.
Right.
And we didn't want to wind up there in the de novo, and I still don't want to wind up there in the de novo.
So this boils down to de novo or not de novo, which sounds like Shakespeare.
Well, it winds up that if they would withdraw and do the consultation that you suggested, it's possible they might apply for something that would have community and council and staff support. But the application as it sits in front of us does not.
Okay, well, I appreciate your support for.
I don't know about council support. It doesn't have community support.
I understand.
And it doesn't have staff support.
I appreciate your willingness to support the additional clause. I think that will at least move us along to some degree, even though this looks like it's on the fast track to the OMB. So thank you for that.
Councillor, would you like to draft something for us?
Well, it just so happens there is a draft here. We circulate in advance, and it simply reads that council direct planning staff to undertake a review of the subject lands and their context to determine what appropriate redevelopment opportunities exist, having regard to the issues identified in the planning report in consultation with the local residents and the applicant.
Is that satisfactory, Mr. Solicitor? Is there any jeopardy to us in that formulation?
No, I don't think so, Your Worship.
We have a printed copy that we can put on the big screen.
Thank you. While you're doing that, let's turn to Councillor O'Meara, who's been patiently waiting on the other side of my vision here.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a question with regards to the last delegate. and the process and the timing. So he had said that town staff deemed the application complete. And I'm just wondering if you can clarify how the process goes and who deems it complete. I understand in the pre-consult, we ask for a number of things, there's a back and forth, but is it the applicant who says, I'm done, this is my complete application, or does enough information come in where staff says, okay, we're now deeming this complete? Who does the I'm completely done with this element?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor O'Meara. So, in fact, it's an authority of council that's delegated to the Director of Planning Services, or the Director of Planning Services designate. In this case, it would be staff in the Development Approval section of the Planning Department. Normally, the process is such that they are required under Livable Oakville to have a pre-consultation agreement signed before an application can be declared complete, among other matters. And it's set out in section 2817(8), I believe, of Livable Oakville. So what they're required to do is contact staff at the town, set up a pre-consultation meeting. These meetings are attended by outside agencies and town staff as well, so things like Conservation Halton, the school boards, the region of Halton, and we come together on a 2-week cycle, and then they review the applications with the applicant. At that time, all the partner agencies and town departments come together and say, here's our standard list of reports and in terms of reference. In some cases, there are amendments made to them, site-specifically to account for unique variances in the application. And then there's an agreement that's signed that's in effect for at least 6 months. And it outlines all of the information that's required to be submitted in order for the application to be considered complete. So if they apply for the application within the 6-month time frame, staff's first job is to review it against the assigned pre-consultation agreement and basically match up the reports. Again, it's not a review of the quality of the report, but rather it's making sure that the reports that we discussed are in fact there. So if we wanted a transportation report, there's in fact a transportation there. So normally what would happen, coming down to who, the planner assigned to the file on the regular applications would be in the position of doing that. More recently, we've instituted a situation where if there are any issues or questions, it immediately goes up to the manager. And if there's any question at that point, it immediately goes up to the senior manager. And if anything's presented to the senior manager, it automatically has to come to the director for a final determination.
Okay, so just so I'm understanding this right, and I'm sure there might be a lot of questions out there as well. It's basically a checklist, and we review a checklist. The manager will review the checklist of what was discussed in the pre-consult, and once those boxes are ticked, then theoretically it's deemed complete. But I guess what we've heard today and what we're hoping with some of the changes provincially is that the quantity or the qualitative stuff inside those reports might be lacking, that we might find incomplete, although the tick is marked on the box, so theoretically it's complete, but really the information in there is not enough or substantive enough that we could make a discussion. Would that be a fair summary then?
Through you, Your Worship, to the councillor, in most cases, yes. In some cases, there are site-specific nuances that require more of a box ticking and a little bit more of an in-depth review of the application, or sorry, the supporting studies that are submitted to ensure that any nuances that were captured in the pre-consultation process and dialogue with the applicant are actually reflected in there. So it might be a planning justification report with a specific emphasis on some aspect of the development. So we would look to see the planning justification report and then sections within the document that deal with that unique aspect. So by and large, yes, but there's still some tweaking.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Chisholm.
Just a quick question with respect to the comments made from our past candidate, our speaker. The Heritage Cultural Landscape report, was that on the checklist? Was that a requirement? Okay.
Through Your Worship, to councillor, I'm informed from Rob that it was not.
Thank you.
Councillor Elgar.
Yeah, thank you. To you, Mr. Mayor. So is it true that our official plan has enough land designated to 2031 to meet the numbers from the province in the regional official plan under Schedule 3, the forecast?
Through Your Worship, to councillor, to the councillor, yes, in fact, that Livable Oakville does meet those targets.
I'm not talking targets, I'm talking forecast.
Forecast, yes, sorry, that was my mistake. Forecast, yes.
Thank you.
Alrighty then. We have a proposed amendment to the resolution before us, the refusal report. And shall I put the vote on the amendment?
Just for clarification on the amendment, would that mean that we are going to do an EIA?
No.
That the developer will be doing still the EIA?
So,
There's nothing in here that would stop what's already going on, Counselor.
No, I'm just wondering what we're going to do. That's all I'm asking. What are we going to do with this resolution?
So
What
this-
are we trying to do with here?
This is a consultation with the neighborhood and the developer and the staff to see what, as discussed between Mr. Long and Counselor Knoll a little earlier this evening.
But Mr. Long is 100% behind the current official plan and the appropriate zoning that is already in place, from what I confirmed with him, and he's not representing himself, he's representing 200 people. I'm just trying to figure out what we think we're going to do with this.
As I understand it, as I heard Mr. Long, he was in support of this idea from his counselor. Are you saying that you disagree with it?
I'm trying to understand what we're really trying to do here, not waste everybody's time going forward thinking they're going to get something that they might not get. And I'm just concerned. I don't mind what you're doing. I just want to know exactly what we are doing. Are we going to live to our official plan and our zoning, or are we starting to wobble? I'm concerned we start modifying things and all of a sudden we've got natural areas, right now they want it as their own private space.
Counselor,
I'm just concerned.
what words here make you think that we're changing the official plan?
Well, what appropriate redevelopment opportunities exist? To me, it's pretty straightforward what we have in our official plan and in our zoning today.
Would you say that the application was conforming to our official plan?
Well, as Mr. Cheeseman stated, of course it doesn't, because it is an official plan amendment. Then that's number one, like the flag is up immediately, yes.
So I'm happy to support the counselor's suggestion for neighborhood consultation with staff and the applicant to see what might be possible. And I don't understand.
Sorry, I'm going to support. I'm just trying to figure what we're really trying to do to get the neighbors to change everything.
Well, I don't know. How many more times we can say what we say? And the words are on paper in front of you. Counselor Grant.
Essentially, I'm going to explode. Don't look over my direction. Essentially, we had told the people in the community that we would have a lot of consultation on what was going on this property. We've heard tonight that people understand that there is something that's going to happen. So we wanted to get it enshrined in documentation that the applicant and the local residents will be involved in whatever solution we get coming forward. We're not trying to change anything. We're not trying to move official plans. We're just saying in a documented form that we can look back and point to that, yes, you two have to get together with our staff so that we all come together with an idea that would work for that area. That's all we're saying. We're not trying to change anything. We're not doing anything crazy. We're just trying to make sure that everybody understands their place in the next steps.
Hey, enjoy. It'll be fun.
Counselor Adams.
I have two questions. One, I understand that this resolution means that we're not coming back with a draft motion to change the official plan. Is that correct? This is to come back and say, these are the concepts.
Counselor, you should be asking the mover and the author of the resolution.
Well, I'm asking our staff because they're the ones that are going to take the direction. If the mover and seconder want to clarify that, that'd be great. But that's my understanding of it.
I'd be happy to clarify, Your Worship, if that's helpful. Our intention is not to circumvent the motion that potentially will precede this, which is a turning down the app. That would require reconsideration at that point. So really what we're looking for is we're looking for some input, because something at some point in the fullness of time is going to happen on this property. There's no doubt. So instead of doing it in a vacuum, we'd like to actually have the consultation that Councillor Grant and I promised in the area. Staff concur, because it is a special, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a special study area right now, I believe it's, yeah. So there is a demand for, even from our own planning, for a additional study in that area. So let's get that started now instead of simply reacting in the future and with a position of a lack of knowledge. Let's respond with a position of knowledge from both the perspective of what that special study would require, but also, more importantly, what the residents and the developer, who both have a big interest on this, feel they can do and maybe find some commonality.
I think that's wonderful, and I support it.
Thank you.
And the other question I had for our staff is there was a question previously about whether Oakville met the forecast for future years, and the answer is yes. My follow-up question is, because we meet the forecast, does that mean that no development can ever come forward?
No, through your worship, no.
And can council deny applications because we meet the forecast?
Through your, no, through your worship to the councillor. Council can consider any matters that relate to an application.
Are we required to consider applications, whether or not we meet the forecast?
Yes.
Thank you.
Are we on topic, the topic before the
I asked those
council?
que-
So, Councillor Adams?
Yeah.
Thank you for your questions and information. I'm not speaking to you. Councillor Elgar is seeking the floor. On the floor is an amendment on the screen. Are you going to speak to the amendment?
Well, since you have allowed Councillor Adams to ask a question to staff, I have a letter from the province which says something a little bit different. And I think we should consider it, that we have the ability to not add more people. Our forecast is a forecast. It's not a minimum. And I think that's what everybody should understand around this table, and everybody in the audience too. We don't have to even meet the forecast. Nothing happens if we do not. Like this is a very important meeting, and things are thrown out here. We got to make sure that the residents are aware of what really happens. We talk about the PPS, the growth plan. To 2031, we have met the forecast in our planning. We can consider, but we can deny. And yes, we can be taken to the OMB, which it looks like we're going now anyway. So, like, I don't want to get into this game, he said, she said, and I can throw the letter. I carry it with me along with a whole bag full of stuff, but I was trying to keep it simple tonight. But if we really want to get into something like that, I'm up for it. I got lots of material.
Thank you, Councillor, I think, although I really don't understand, what, let's just.
Hope you understand. I think Councillor Adams is saying, hey, doesn't matter. We have to hear it and we have to approve it. Like, I'm not, this is a crazy
Councillor,
talk.
I object. Councillor Adams at no point ever said we had to approve anything. He didn't ask or imply any such thing. You're hearing things that haven't been said.
Go back and review the tape later this evening, and I'll get back to you with that.
Shall I put the amendment to a vote? We have Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the mover of the motion, or the amendment, rather. I guess I want some clarification and maybe some understanding for the many residents who are here this evening. If we do end up going to the Ontario Municipal Board eventually, the residents do realize it's the corporation that defends the item at the Ontario Municipal Board. In other words, we don't solicit information at that point until that application has had a decision and it's basically dead in the water one way or another. I just don't want some of the residents having a misconception that this amendment would provide them an opportunity to have something or input into a possible either settlement or a possible decision that may not be what they're hoping it's going to be. Like, that's fine if it's running in parallel to it, which I think is great, because hopefully if we do end up being successful, then that would be a great backup plan. I just don't want people to have a misconception that that's part of the process.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't believe I heard any misconceptions. I would recommend that we adopt the discipline of only hearing what's said and only reading what's written. And reading stuff in and hearing stuff that wasn't said doesn't help any discussion go forward. Let me ask again if you'd like to vote on this now. Councillor O'Meara.
Your Worship, and I apologize for being sort of the last one here, but speaking specifically to this amendment, from what I heard, the representative for the applicant, they're going to the OMB. So depending on how this vote goes. So I'm wondering what the point of this resolution is if the applicant is determined to pursue a plan that's before them. And secondly, from the limited time I've been here and interacting with planning staff, they have been adamant that they deal with applicants that come in. It's not their job to go out and to propose plans on properties. So although all of us who are approached always tell, and any good developer goes out to the community prior to any of this to avoid packing a town hall room, it's really up to the developer to do this. So I'm wondering what we're hoping to get by asking staff to go outside of the process on privately owned property that a developer has, and that's really up to them whether they want to be a part of this or not. I mean, they should want to do this, but I'm just wondering why we have to have an amendment to go above and beyond to get a developer to do what they should be doing in a normal cause. I guess that's my question to the mover.
Councillor, let's first turn to staff and see if staff are content with this amendment, this proposed amendment.
Through your worship, just a couple of points I want to make in general. So when we originally had spoken about this, we talked about a withdrawal. Withdrawal of the application was a resetting of the clock, at least from staff standpoint, which allowed the further dialogue that I heard that the applicant was seeking. The withdrawal would allow more time for members of the community to be involved in discussions. It's obviously important to this neighborhood. The applicant chose not to withdraw, so our options became extremely limited. In terms of that, you could direct planning staff to ignore the 180 days and continue a dialogue tonight and consider this just as our first meeting, knowing full well that now we're risking an OMB hearing without the benefit of council's decision. That's something that could happen. And then as I understand the amendment, and I'll let the councillors explain it, but this resolution is meant to really, as I see it, to allow that dialogue to go with the certainty of the denial being in place. So we're trying to juggle a couple of things here, and I don't know how well it's being managed, but if you're asking me where we've got to, it was really an attempt to have further dialogue, which I understand that all the parties seem to be interested in. And the withdrawal, at least from our standpoint, was the clearest way to get there. Does that help you, Councillor?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm just not sure whether, because I'll support the motion, because it's the ward councillors are asking for it, and I'm happy to do that. But I'm just, I think we're going above and beyond for what I hear tonight is a developer who didn't want to withdraw, who's said that they're ready to go to the OMB. So, I think we're trying to bend over backwards here, and I'm not sure if we're getting met halfway. But I'll yield to my council colleagues over there and support the motion, the amendment.
Councillor, I just correct one thing. What we heard from counsel for the applicant was that they're not prepared yet to go to the board because they don't have those other pieces done yet. There's every possibility that they'll take advantage of the opportunity to consult. All right. So I'm going to put the vote because we've got other items to do, and I think we've gone back and forth on this now. All those in favor of amending the resolution in front of us, show you. Any opposed? That carries. So now we need a mover for the recommendation as amended. Councillor Knoll, that's you, I think. All those in favor? And those opposed, if any? Sorry, Councillor Duddick? On what? The main motion. All right, the main motion has carried, and under our rules, any councillor at any time, even after the vote, can call for a recorded vote, and we will now have a recorded vote. So rise to be named to be recorded in support of the main motion as amended. Councillor Lischina, Councillor Adams, Councillor Grant, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Lapworth, Councillor Elgar, Mayor Burton, Councillor Hutchins, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Duddick, and Councillor O'Meara. I declare the motion carried unanimously. And Thank you, everyone. Now, because there's a large number of people who may not be fascinated by the rest of our meeting, I'm going to offer council a 5-minute bio break and the audience a chance to rearrange themselves. All right, I'm calling back into order this Planning and Development Council meeting now that we can transition to item number 5, the public meeting report for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision for Martelac Estates. And if you give your attention to Mr. Thun, he will review for the public the proposal in summary form. And these are the documents that council's already read. Mr. Thun.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is the statutory public meeting for a zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision submitted by Martelac Estates for their development at the property on the north side of Dundas Street, east of Proudfoot Trail. And it just, if you remember from the Graydon Banning presentation, is immediately to the east of that property. The report can be found on page 115 of tonight's agenda. And once again, purpose of the report being a statutory public meeting is to obtain any further public input, and we will return once the technical review is completed with a recommendation report. The slide before council identifies the application area and its context with the surrounding area. To the south, Dundas Street and residential. You see Proudfoot Trail just to the west of the subject property. Graydon Banning, we just spoke about that previously, is immediately to the west. North of this property is the Graydon Banning and 16 Mile Creek, and east is the Chow Radio Tower lands. This is the remnant parcel of land from the Shevchenko property for council's information. This property is entirely within the East Secondary Plan, and designations applicable to the property are neighborhood area, Dundas Urban Core Area, Natural Heritage System Area, and also Village Square. The property is traversed by an avenue transit corridor, which is just to the east of the property, and there's where it's traversed. The site is in neighborhood 14 of the North Oakville East Secondary Plan. Similar to the Graydon Banning property, the property is existing development ED, and the applicant is proposing to implement existing zoning categories and special provisions as contained in bylaw 2009-189, and I have outlined those in page 6 of the staff report. On the same night as the Graydon Banning, we held those in conjunction with each other just because of the nature of where they're located. The public information meeting was held on February 7th. 3 members attended. Once again, no concerns were raised on this application. The proposal that's before council right now reflects 67 detached units, 19 townhouse units, blocks and part blocks for future residential development, future condominium along the Dundas Street frontage, natural heritage system up in the northeast corner, a park related to where the existing, or where the statue used to be, a park in that area, and stormwater management pond in the southwest corner. So similar to Graydon Banning, Your Worship and members of council, we're putting forward the following recommendation that the comments be received, and the notice of council's decision reflect comments received from the public will be addressed. And once again, it is a public meeting to obtain input, and we will return after the technical review. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thun. Council, are there questions? Are there members of the public with information for council on this file? Going once, going twice? I see none, Madam Clerk. I'll look for a motion. Councillor Elgar.
Move receipt of the report.
Are you moving the recommendation as printed in the agenda?
Yes, that is, which is receipt.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Number 6, public meeting and recommendation report. Town-initiated omnibus zoning bylaw amendment to zoning bylaw 2014-14. This is all the lands south of Dundas and all the lands that are north of Highway 407. And not the lands that are in between. And if you give your attention now to Leslie Gill Woods, we will summarize this for the public who may be watching.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. This is a statutory public meeting and recommendation report about the item the mayor introduced, this omnibus zoning bylaw amendment to zoning bylaw 2014-14. It's omnibus because it's far-reaching and affects many sections of the plan, or of the zoning bylaw, excuse me. We do these amendments every so often because issues arise through the ongoing use of the zoning bylaw. The proposed amendment addresses a number of uses identified through the ongoing use of the bylaw. They're wide-ranging and they're detailed in the notice and in the staff report. And as I mentioned, pretty much all zones would be impacted by the proposed amendment. We've had a few inquiries about the proposed amendment. Most required just a simple clarification or explanation, but there were a few questions that have resulted in changes to the proposed bylaw. There's a memo before you tonight that describes the changes. I'm just going to go through them quickly here. So bylaw 2017-25, which is before you tonight, would be changed as follows. Item 3C on page 2 of the proposed bylaw. The bylaw appears in its original form on page 303 of your agenda. So on the second page of that bylaw, in the definition of residential floor area, there's a new definition proposed and there was an error. Clause C2 there indicated the residential floor area above a private garage would be lesser than 25%, and it actually should have said greater than, so that correction has been made to the bylaw. It didn't make sense in the previous version, now it does, so that's helpful. The second revision is to item 4H, and this is being removed in its entirety because of potential conflict with another set of provisions in the bylaw, and so that conflict will be addressed in a future housekeeping amendment to the zoning bylaw. And the third revision is to item 11G on page 11, and this was just a typo, not caught by spell check. The original clause used the words differed, and it should have said different, so that change has been made. So pending public comments received tonight, this is the revised recommendation from staff. It's in your memo and on the screen before you. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you kindly. Councillor, you have questions? Councillor O'Meara.
Just happy to move, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. We have delegations. Madam Clerk, would you call, or how many delegations are there?
One listed.
Would you call the listed delegation, and then I'll poll the audience.
The delegation speaking to this item is Denicia Meschini.
Welcome, ma'am. Council looks forward to your information. And as before, if we could get you to speak, we need to arrange the microphone so that it's sort of aimed at you, and then everyone will be able to hear you.
Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, town councillors, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a novice. Please be patient with me. I'll try to be in time. I would like to thank you first of all about allowing me to make a submission regarding this unit we are talking about in behalf of my husband and I. It's regarding the accessory dwelling unit. It's for part 4, section 411, residential zones, regarding an accessory dwelling, which is D, and E also. I'd like to speak with you regarding those two, are related with pending application I have on my house regarding a unit, a dwelling. I did in my detached house. We did in detached house and used for my family. My son, adult son, was just for the privacy of him and his family. Now he's working outside, and we wish until they come back with the work, they are gone, and until they come back, to rent that unit, that dwelling. We did the best we can, the best we could afford to do it, and the way the house permitted. We are in Clearview. The house is a double door front, and just the only way we could do that, we just to go to the front door instead of opening the doors, we just divide without anything structural. We got the inspectors in, Mrs. Kelly Stevens was in, lots of town staff from the Department of the Development. And since November, we try to figure out how we can do, because what we did was the stairs we use, like a Scarlett O'Hara stairs, to go to the second floor with 4 bedrooms, and was the only way we can have a unit in our house. And then the living room, we did a kitchen, which is used, and the purpose of it to continue to be used for the family later on. The situation we got, then we couldn't figure out how related with an accessory dwelling shall have a maximum floor area of the lesser 40% of the residential floor area of the detached dwelling or semi-detached dwelling, or 75 square feet. This means 833 square feet. The way we could divide it was more than that. And we are in the situation, when I receive, this, we are going to do that. But we try to figure out how to do it. And I figure out that this would be, if we amend those two, in the order to, instead of lesser, if we say of lesser of 40% of the residential floor area, or 75 meters, this is very disadvantage for the detached house. The house is 28 square feet, the 2 floors, but with a finished basement, it's approximately 4,200 or so. And this unit is come to about 1,400. We tried to figure out how to do that. First of all, we thought about to make an adjustment. And then the adjustment, the township cannot support me in that, because the adjustment would be too large between 833 and how the unit looks. What I'm asking you, if you can review and amend, the 40% would be advantageous for a larger house like ours, and not to put the lesser of. At once we say the lesser of would be only 75 square meters or 833 for both the detached and the semi-detached. Please review, if it's possible, to have for detached homes, we usually are double than the detached ones, to have a maximum 40%, or for all the houses, if you wish. A maximum of 40%, to be a little bit flexible, not to reduce us at that amount of 75 meters, which practically impossible for house this style. You cannot do anything. And also with the doors, the houses in our area, the houses the way they are, you don't have possibility to go from the side. Even you go in the kitchen and you cannot do it. Or you can go to the garage. Then you cannot make an entrance there. The only entrance in a house like ours is just a double door. What we did, just a double door instead of to be opened in a way. We just make a very small separation in the hallways, not structural at all. And the doors, they open differently. I made the application, the planning department has all of it, plans and everything, so it's this here, and they advise me, they say, the second dwelling unit that has been created is too large in floor area to be considered an accessory unit. Based on those section. Secondly, the entrance to the unit does not comply with zoning regulation as it is must be located the side or rear of the property. And that's why I'm asking you, please review and see then in D is the question of this one. If you give us to all of us, because the 40% reflects everybody's possibility to do smaller houses and larger houses. In order to benefit to both 40 and 75 square meters means that the house should be, then for the house, maximum of 2,082 square feet. That means that 75 or 833 or 40% means would be beneficial. Whatever house, floor area is more than that, the 2,082 square feet house on the 3 floors, we don't benefit. Then we cannot do it. It's not possible for some houses. And in our ward, we are in 3 in Clearview area. Over there are some designs of the houses like mine, which would benefit if you are so kind to review because I have this one, I have to, up to tomorrow, I have to review it and to see it. And we have to figure out how to do it. Also, they said they cannot, the town's planning staff have provided you with opinion that they would not support a variance application to widen your driveway or permit access to accessory unit, because it's a variance would cost first of all money, but not only that. They said you are going to gamble because the difference between 833 to be a small variance up to 1,000 something what is there, is too big. Then we cannot go that way. It's a gamble for us to go, and they don't support. I asked Kate, you are going to support me, and she said, we cannot support you because, is this, and I figure out, if you are so kind to allow me to propose an amendment for 411D. I propose 40% would be beneficial for any kind of house, and E also to allow some houses like ours with double door on the front and to be without any cut in the walls, nothing construction, nothing to change the way the house it is, because that is possible. They give us possibility to that. And then not only in behalf of me and my husband, but for seniors, we are seniors in the situation the house is a home for us for 28 years. It's a home for my son and his family. Then please allow us to do those amendments in order for us to benefit, and we can rent to the young people, which they need small places. The way it is, they said, to a family, I can rent it, and we try it. Nobody went it. But the young generation by rooms, that was the idea. If we do it, eventually, if we have a accessory dwelling, and in it, we can make a lodging house which permit us to have 2 rooms rented. That was the suggestion. And when we come to apply to make it, we saw that we cannot because of the size of it. I don't know if I was clear, But, you know, I'm looking forward to make an application to you, to write a letter to you or something. But I would like to propose this kind, to look into this situation. We need in Oakville, we need those spaces of affordable units for young generation especially, and for us, for some of us, you know. Thank you very much, I appreciate.
Thank you for your information. Councillor Elgar has a question for you.
Have you sat down with staff and gone over
Yes,
specifically
yeah,
your issue?
they know me so much.
Okay, that was my question.
Some of them, they said, okay, why you don't ask to work for us, because you
Okay.
are here all the time. We tried did that since September, you know, and thank you very much that I'm here, you know.
I thank you.
And ask you. And I do everything possible, you know, a letter to you, Mr. Mayor, and to councillors and to our, you know, to speak with you, you know, for Ward 3. But just help us. It's not for me. It's just for many people in Oakville. And I read it, by the way. I can believe that the seniors, we are 33% in Oakville. And most of us, which we have a house, we want to stay in our house, to be active and to live longer. And this is the point. Please, let's do together, you know, something like that. And also the young generation, the people who they cannot afford houses, to buy houses, to rent houses, because you come at the qualification there with the income. And then we are maybe for a long time, you know, the young generation, young adults coming out of university with debts, you know, and then going to the bank. They don't have the salary to afford. And then we come there with them right now, something like us with low incomes. We work hard, but still we are here. And then thank you very much for your understanding. And please, you know, I do my best, you know, I do everything, all the application you want, or something, just to do this for us, for Oakville, living Oakville. Thank you very much. For years, I'm watching you, how hard you work for doing that. For years, I'm working, and I thought we have to prepare ourselves to keep the house, and this would be the way to do for us to keep the house and to help the young generation also. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your information. Are there any other members of the public with information for council on this item? The item is moved by Councillor O'Meara. Are there any discussion to be offered? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Council, I believe that if we can turn our attention now to item number 8, the first discussion item, the recommendation report for Metroli. Mr. Abma, maybe you know how to say it.
I actually don't. I've been saying Metroli, but I'll leave it up to the owners if they would like to correct us all. Metroli.
Metroli. Thank goodness. Now we know.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to present a recommendation regarding a zoning bylaw amendment for Metroli Developments, which was presented at a statutory public meeting on November 28, 2016. The property is located in North Oakville at 3060 and 3072 6 Line, west of 6 Line, between Kading Trail and Lane 39. Here's 6 Line right here. Dundas is running horizontal this way. Kading Trail, Lane 139 is this laneway in here, and the property is outlined in black. The North Oakville East Secondary Plan designates the lands as neighborhood area, and the North Oakville East Master Plan identifies the lands as neighborhood center area. The neighborhood center area category is intended to accommodate a range of medium-density residential development, which can include a limited amount of commercial, from a heights of 2 to 5 stories, and can include townhouses. The subject application is consistent with the secondary plan, master plan, and the neighborhood center designation. The subject property is currently zoned existing development, and like most lands in North Oakville, a zoning bylaw amendment is necessary to implement a development proposal. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment being brought forward tonight will permit development of the proposal and implement the secondary plan policies for the site. The applicant is seeking site-specific neighborhood center zoning for the property to permit the development of a total of 109 townhouse units with one level of underground parking, as shown in the site plan that was submitted in support of the application that I've shown up here. In summary, there are 6 blocks of townhouse units proposed. 4 of the blocks will contain 3-story stacked townhouses with underground parking, and the 2 blocks in the right rear corner of the drawing will be 2-story block townhouses with underground parking. Site access will, let's just move back if I can. Site access will be from 6th line down here and will be centrally located. Vehicles would then proceed down a ramp into the underground parking structure. The remainder of the space between the townhouse blocks will be dedicated to common landscape areas as well as individual patio areas and access to the garbage structure in the back here. But this will all be landscaped areas that you see in between the buildings. Here's an elevation showing one of the 3-story stacked townhouse units fronting onto 6th line, and you may be looking at this thinking, hey, that looks more like 4 stories, but what you're seeing at the top is the access to the rooftop terraces, and those are actually set back from the face of the building. This is an elevation which shows the 2-story, what I'm calling regular style townhouse dwellings fronting into the interior courtyard, and again, similar with the rooftop terraces up top is what's up on top there. A public statutory meeting was held back on November 28, 2016 for this item. Members from the public who spoke at the public meeting raised concerns regarding the availability of visitor parking in the neighborhood and for the proposed development, potential overlook or privacy concerns, particularly from the proposed rooftop terraces, and potential shadowing of rear yards around for the properties around the subject site. Since that time, staff have met with the applicant to look at addressing these concerns. The applicant submitted a shadow analysis, which indicates that sunlight will continue to be available in surrounding rear yards during spring, summer, and fall afternoons and evenings. And staff have reviewed the analysis and are satisfied with the results. With respect to privacy and overlook concerns, the proposed zoning bylaw, as drafted for tonight, contains specific regulations to address the overlook concerns from the rooftop terraces. The rooftop terraces, for example, will either need to be set back a minimum of 2 meters from the roof edge to prevent overlook, or provide a 6-foot-high barrier along the edge of the rooftop terrace, such as opaque glass or other material. And this should make it much less likely for anyone enjoying a rooftop terrace from looking directly into neighboring rear yards. Lastly, regarding visitor parking, the applicant has agreed to provide 17 visitor parking stalls within their parking structure. These will be reserved for visitor parking only and freely accessible for visitors, and the requirement to provide these visitor stalls has also been put into the proposed zoning bylaw. Lastly, the applicant has provided the town with drawings demonstrating that lay-by parking is doable along 6th line in front of their development for review by the town transportation staff. Should staff determine that lay-by parking is functionally feasible on 6th line, staff will then determine how, if, and when this may be implemented. And it's something that that town staff would look at for the length of 6th line, not just specifically in front of this development. And it is important to note that any potential lay-by parking on 6th line is not being tied to the zoning bylaw amendment application. It simply represents another opportunity to provide additional visitor parking for the neighborhood. And again, like I said, it will be looked at by staff separate from this application. Since the public notice for this item went out, we have received correspondence from one nearby resident, which I believe has been distributed to you, along with some of the email conversation from staff. I believe her issues relate primarily to noise and dust from construction activities. In conclusion, the application conforms to the overall policy direction of the secondary plan and all other relevant policy documents, reflects the servicing requirements of the region of Halton, and meets all requirements of the town. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the application as it does represent good planning. And this concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much for your summary of the file. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. Just with respect to the parking, you mentioned the lay-by parking would be a consideration on 6th line. realistically speaking, how many spots can you get on 6th Line?
I don't have an answer for the entire length of 6th Line from
No,
Dundas.
but within
to-
a reasonable proximity of this particular development.
If I remember the drawings that were submitted correctly, somewhere in the realm of, say, 6 stalls might be possible, technically feasible. It needs to be balanced with the ability to provide street trees and boulevard landscaping and things like that, which is something that we would need to look at.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. On page 208 of the package, you talk about the urban design criteria for the evaluation of shadow impact analysis require that it be demonstrated that adequate sunlight is available. What does that mean? What is adequate sunlight?
Through you, Your Worship, the urban design, there are urban design criteria, and I don't know them off the top of my head, but I believe it looks at that certain specific times of the year that there is an adequate amount of sunlight in the evenings and fall. I can tell you that based on the shadow analysis of this one, a lot of the shadowing that's occurring in the rear yards of the adjacent development is actually coming from the existing homes and not the proposed development.
So the proposed development in no way has any shadow impact?
There is shadowing that does occur, but it doesn't block for a certain period of time in any 1 yard a significant amount of shadowing.
Yeah, no, I was curious because the word's like adequate. I'm just trying to figure out what adequate means. But, okay, and now as far as the terraces, I realize they can't get the setback you want, so they're going to go higher with some kind of a fencing type thing?
Through you, Your Worship, every rooftop terrace requires to have a safety barrier of a certain height as part of the building code. The bylaw is written such that the developer can choose to set that back by 2 meters to pull the edge of the rooftop terrace away. But there's also an opportunity where it's not feasible to do that, to pull it back 2 meters from the edge of the building, is that you can put a barrier up to 6 feet so that if someone's standing, wouldn't just be able to turn and look over into the rear yard.
Okay, so that's what they're doing in this case?
In some of the buildings, I believe, yes. In some of the buildings, they may be doing the setback.
Okay, I thank you for that.
Thank you. Yes, it is me, Councillor Grant. I was just wondering, we're talking 6 parking spots on the 6th Line. I mean, it's to be an arterial. Go back 4 years, we couldn't get any parking spots along Niagawa, around, in the same sort of area, that close to Dundas. So I'm just wondering, why is this different here? And again, I mean, 6 spots is nothing. And given that the traffic on the arterial is going to be amazing, to use a nice word, I'm just surprised that we're even considering putting lay-by parking on an arterial road.
Through you, Your Worship, I believe that is something that definitely is part of when we look at putting lay-by on 6th Line, that will be taken into consideration. I do note the environmental assessment for 6th Line does talk about the opportunity for lay-by parking may be considered, and that's what we're talking about, is looking at whether it is technically feasible and in what locations.
So if I understand you correctly, the regulation, the policy framework for the 2 streets is slightly different, in that the one allows consideration of lay-by, Commissioner?
I would note that Niagawa is a regional road. Niagawa also connects to James Snow Parkway in future years, so its use and function is much different than 6th Line. The EA for 6th Line was specifically designed, as Mr. Abnett said, to accommodate some laid-by where feasible in the plan, whereas that consideration was not given in Niagawa when the region had done that EA.
So they're different. Councillor Knoll.
They're different, however, the residents all come back to us freaking out after the fact, because it's caveat emptor, they're not watching they're not looking at the specifications of their homes, et cetera, and then they come back to us concerned because their mother-in-laws can't park in front of their homes, although that could be an advantage. Actually, I love you, mother-in-law Janet. Anyway, the question I actually have was with respect to the underground parking. I understand there's a bit of a concession with respect to the underground parking. We got some additional spots. Is there anything that can be done in terms of site plan that would make sure that we enshrine that those spots remain underground or remain publicly accessible visitor parking spots, and they don't just get absorbed into the inventory and rented by the condo corporation, which I know has happened in other buildings in a community that we also represent in Ward 5. So is there can anything be done in terms of the site plan or any other conditions of approval which would ensure that those spots remain available long after the developer's gone and it's a condominium corporation?
Is this a job for a site plan agreement?
Through you, Your Worship, I believe that zoning is a good tool to ensure that they will be provided in perpetuity, because if those 17 visitor parking spots are converted to private spots, the development would be in non-compliance with the zoning bylaw, and appropriate action could be taken at that point.
So these parking spots they were granted or they were provided by the developer as a result of the concerns that we expressed during the public hearing, correct?
Through Your Worship, yes, that is correct.
So they exceed the requirements under the zoning, correct?
Through Your Worship, yes, I believe so.
So how then by writing what are you writing this into a special provision of the zoning bylaw? Like how do you enshrine it in law? Because it exceeds the standards under the overall bylaw. How do you enshrine it in law so that there is some actionability? I have no doubt the developer means well here, but unfortunately, once the corporation gets registered and it's off to be managed by its residents, things can change. So the good intentions of the development company that's putting it together, I'm just concerned that may get lost down the road.
Through you, Your Worship, I also believe we could take a look at the site plan stage and look at putting clauses to the effect that these will be maintained as visitor stalls in the site plan agreement.
Your Worship, is it appropriate as part of the motion tonight that we refer this, or can we just make it a staff referral so that that's captured for site plan to look at? Or is that something as chair of site plan you'd be prepared to make sure it gets managed as it goes through the process?
Well, I promise that we will follow up on that, but let's try to make something even better.
Okay.
Perhaps the solicitor could recommend wording for this motion to capture the need to take steps that are enforceable to retain the visitor parking. And we could move on to another item while you do that. Is that agreeable to everyone? I understand we have a registered delegation for item 15, and the evening draws on. And I thought it would be a lovely gesture of consideration if we turn to item 15 now, so that we could perhaps spare them that much longer here. So what we'll do is we'll have Ms. Shepherd summarize the matter before us. As you know from reading the report, there was a bit of a difference between the staff recommendation and the committee decision. And Ms. Shepherd, we're ready to be edified.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of council. I'll try to be brief. I know it's been a long evening for everyone. So the issue before us here today is the heritage permit application that was brought forward to the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee meeting of February 28th regarding development plans for 156 Randall Street and 140 Thomas Street. The heritage permit application involved three main components: the relocation of a designated heritage building at 156 Randall, proposing to move it to 140 Thomas Street, which would require the demolition of the existing non-historic building at 140 Thomas Street, and then the construction of a new 4-story condominium building directly behind the relocated heritage building. And so there are a couple of photos here on your screen to provide some context for the development application. There are certainly more that were included with the heritage permit application as well. This is the streetscape along Randall Street, where the primary bulk of the 4-story new condominium would be visible, although it certainly will be visible from Thomas Street as well. The green line shows where the designated heritage structure is currently located, and the red outline shows where it is proposed to be relocated to. The other lines indicate the footprint of the proposed new condominium building. Taking you quickly through the elevation drawings, here we have the north elevation fronting onto Randall Street. Taking you around the corner to Thomas Street, where you can clearly see that the relocated Heritage Building is located at the front of the condominium building. The south elevation, which is the side yard along Thomas Street, and the side yard elevation, west elevation along Randall Street. These are a couple of drawings, illustrations, that will give you some more information about the future context of the site. So the image in the top left corner shows the proposed new development with the other buildings along Thomas Street located in front. Then we have on the top right corner a rendering of what the proposed condominium building should look like. And then the bottom illustration shows the new Randall Street elevation with the proposed building that has been submitted as a site plan application at 150 Randall Street, noting that this building certainly has not been approved and is currently in the review process, but that is what's out there at the moment for us to consider. There was, as Your Worship has noted, a difference between the staff recommendation and the Heritage Oakville recommendation. The Heritage Oakville recommendation was based on discussions between the committee, the applicant, and the interested stakeholders who are registered as a delegation tonight. They're an adjacent property owner. That the Heritage Committee supported in principle the relocation of the designated heritage building, which is the Charles Davis House, and the demolition of the non-historic structure at 140 Thomas Street. But these things were subject to the revised plans for the new development coming back to the Heritage Oakville Committee for review and the additional process that follows, and has indicated a number of the elements that the revised proposal should address, including stepping back the new structure, addressing massing concerns on the Thomas Street streetscape, and creating a more sympathetic transition from the relocated heritage building to the new condominium. I am happy to answer any questions you might have.
There might be some. Maybe there aren't. No questions. Well, thank you, Dan. We'll take our delegation then. Madam Clerk, would you call the registered delegation?
Delegation speaking to this item is Simon Fung from O'Connor McLeod Hanna.
Welcome, sir. Council looks forward to your information with
Thank
some
you.
curiosity.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, my name is Simon Fung, spelled F-U-N-G, and I'm a lawyer with the law firm O'Connor McLeod Hanna. I'm here representing the property owners at 134.
If you just wait, I'm just concerned that your microphone isn't on. And it's nothing you can do, but we have.
I can shout. Oh, that works. Sorry. So I'm here representing the property owners at 134 Thomas Street, which abuts the subject property to the south. My clients are strongly opposed to the proposed development as it is currently planned. I'm also joined here tonight by my client's heritage planner, Mr. David Cooming, who's in the back, who's available here to field any questions or concerns from council or from Mr. Mayor tonight. I want to start by saying that having reviewed the minutes of the Oakville Heritage Committee meeting, with respect to this development, I noticed that it is missing any note of my client's delegation at that meeting. I do want to put on record that, however, that my client and I were both indeed present at this meeting and did make presentations opposed to the proposed development. So overall, my client is happy with the recommendation, but would appreciate some certainty in the wording of the recommendation. So having spoken to Ms. Shepherd briefly, who was present on the day of the meeting, I do believe we're on the same page, but for the sake of certainty, I do want to make sure that council understands that the intent of the recommendation, which is basically to start the process again for the application from the beginning. So this means the applicant submits a brand new application with the concerns hopefully addressed. There's a new staff report. There's a new heritage meeting that my client can participate in. there's a new recommendation, and it finally comes back to this council again for approval. So looking at the recommendation, I would say for all intents and purposes, the application is, I would say, denied, because it's starting the whole process again. If this is the intent of the recommendation, which I believe so, my client believes as well, and I think Ms. Shepherd also agrees with as well, then I would ask council to please, for the sake of certainty, just reflect this in the intent, I guess, of its approval, if you decide to approve the recommendation, or simply deny the application. So I would say, just for ease, I would say looking at the recommendation, under sub A, I would say that it reads, the revised plans for the new development be brought back to the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee for further review, and I would add an approval by council, and should address those three factors. So subject to any questions, those are my submissions.
Thank you for your submissions. I've been wanting to use that word, and we have questions for you, but just wonder if I could ask a question of our town solicitor first. Would you? Thank you. Mr. Solicitor, is it possible to approve something and then make it subject to approval again? Or would we be better off to deny this application for the sake of clarity and force the applicant to start over? Or if we deny this, could they start over? Anyway, what guidance would you or Ms. Shepherd offer us on that?
If I may step in for a second, Your Worship, the Heritage Act does allow us to approve heritage permit applications with conditions. I think there's a slight misinterpretation of how the process would actually work. I believe what the intent of the Heritage Committee was to say, we agree, or we will agree to the approval of several portions of this heritage permit application, that being the relocation of the heritage building and the demolition of the non-historic building at 140 Thomas Street. However, before we do that, we want to have the ability to make sure that the proposed new condominium development more appropriately meets the intent of the downtown Oakville Heritage Conservation District, and therefore it would have to come back to the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee for review, and that would, because the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee serves at the will of council, would have to come back to council for final approval. I think this way shows that there was some support for the application, but recognizes that there is more work to be done.
So perhaps the words that are missing here, you know, I'm actually still inclined to deny the application, but listening to you and trying to accommodate you, maybe the missing words are with the following conditions, and we, you know, with that language, which you're telling me comes from the Act.
Yes.
We then, I think, make it crystal clear that they aren't approved for the main game yet.
To the best of my knowledge, that would satisfy the requirements of the Act. I think what Mr. Fung was noting was that the recommendation doesn't specifically say that it would have to come back to council for approval, and I guess my response to that is that nothing happens at the Heritage Committee without council's approval, because they are a body that reviews and recommends.
So, Mr. Solicitor, would you concur with the advice offered by planning staff?
Yes, through you, Your Mayor, and I thank the support from Ms. Shepherd and her expertise in this area.
So could somebody give us a reworded proposal that includes the magic phrase with the following conditions in order to make sure that this is coming back and that they know that they're not thoroughly approved? And now Councillor Dudek and I forget who else, Councillor Giddings maybe? Councillor Dudek.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, I guess I'm a little puzzled because it already stipulates that it has to be brought back to Heritage Oakville. And my understanding is they're doing revisions, but it's not a refusal of the application. Is that not correct?
Correct. The only part of the application that would be revised is the part for the new condominium building. And so there would be a new staff report, and there would likely be a new staff recommendation to consider the new material that's being provided, but it would basically be a continuation of the existing heritage permit, which would not be satisfied until those conditions had been approved by council. All
right. Well, so Ms. Shepherd, are you content with the wording as you're offering us here?
Noting that it is the recommendation of the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee, yet I feel satisfied that the recommendation does meet the intent of the Heritage Act and the intent of the Heritage Committee.
Because we're certainly free to vary this.
Certainly are.
So, you know, if you were to advise us in any way you wanted it varied, I think we might.
If you did want to include with conditions, I would suggest that it follow, be approved with the conditions that instead of subject to.
All right. Good enough for me. There's another hand over here besides Councillor Dudek. Was it Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Giddings? Councillor Giddings. You're good now? Do we have a mover for the motion as changed? Councillor Hutchins? Do we have more discussion? Mr. Fong, are you content as well?
I think my concern is really, I understand the process is that it will go through a new application, you have to go through the committee again, and there has to be a recommendation. But I guess just my concern really is it just says further review. I mean,
So now it's going to say be approved with the condition that the revised plans for the new development be brought back to the Heritage Oakville, et cetera.
Heritage Oakville, I would say, to be more satisfactory to my client, would say further review and approval by council. I know it can be redundant again, but just for the sake of clarity.
I believe Councillor Hutchins meant to include those words after the word review, for further review and approval by council, right? There you go. So now is everybody happy? It's great when everybody's happy. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you for your time and your information. Now, we can back up to number 9. This is a report for receipt, and it sets out what the downtown mitigation strategy framework will address. And I don't see anyone in the audience from the downtown. Are there any members of the public with information for council on this item? No. Is there perhaps a mover for this item? Councillor Giddings.
I'd be happy to move it, Mr. Mayor. I had one question in terms of the mitigation framework. Quite happy with what's listed there. I take it they would be happy before the report comes back in terms of any other strategies that may take place in terms of more specific items under parking options, et cetera.
Okay.
But with that, I'd be happy to move it.
All right. Anyone else? All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is carried. Item number 10, the notice of intention to demolish at 3371 Trafalgar Road. And you have the report. I wonder if there are questions. Councillor Adams.
I have no questions. If there are no delegations, Councillor Lischina and I have discussed it, and we're happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public here for this item? We can accept a motion from one of you, but not both. Councillor Adams has moved the item as recommended in the agenda. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is carried. Number 11 is the Livable by Design Manual Part C Site Design and Development Standards for Oakville and modifications to the document in response to a request from us. Council, are you satisfied with the response to our request? Councillor Elgar is so satisfied he's moving it. Is there further discussion? All in favor? Quick before he changes his mind. That is carried. Thank you. Item number 12 is the Heritage Planning Work Plan Update. Are we satisfied with this? And if so, is there a motion to receive? Councillor Dudek, is that a motion to receive?
Yes, Your Worship, but I'd also like to take this opportunity, to commend our Heritage staff for this publication. I think it's excellent, very, very well written and very well received, so well done.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll know by the votes whether everyone agrees with you. All in favor? Everyone agrees with you. That carries. Item number 13. This is a recommendation that we continue to incent the patio and outdoor display activities of the business improvement areas, and I'd note that that's all 3, not just 1. And so I wonder if there's a mover for this. Councillor Hutchins is offering to move it. But Councillor O'Meara, have you moved anything yet? Councillor O'Meara is moving it. Madam Clerk,
I'm
all
happy
those
to
in
move.
favor?
And I just wanted to say prior to that, that I know that the Brawny businesses and BIA are taking full advantage of this, and they're excited that we're doing this, and it's an integral part of our BIA, so thank you for that.
Now, there's a good ward councillor. Well done. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is carried. Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. We did 14. Now, you have the confidential discussion items before you. It's pretty clear what they are. Do we need to go into camera for that, or can we have motions in public? Councillor Lischena? All right. So this is a motion by Councillor Lischena that the report dated January 25th, 2017 from the Legal Department regarding the appeal to the OMB CAVA 004 2017 for 263 Westdale Road be received, and that and is the rest as printed? And the rest is as printed. As in the addendum. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and thank you very much, Council. Now, we did 15, and so now it would be delightful to have a motion to rise and report to Council.
No, we're not finished. We need to go back to Doug.
To Doug.
that.
Oh, yes, that's right, thank you. Was that number 8?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I've had an opportunity to confer with my colleagues on this, and I've also had reference to the zoning bylaw, which is before council this evening at page 319, and it clearly establishes the minimum number of visitor parking spaces at 17 and the minimum number of resident parking spaces at 119 spaces, and that's a site-specific requirement that's over and above our standard. So I'm satisfied that those parking restrictions are as implemented in the zoning bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor. I am very appreciative of the clarity that you've provided and the underlying good staff work. Councillor Knoll, are you satisfied now with this item?
Yeah, I appreciate the call out on that. It's really important that that he pulled that out both publicly as well as in the report, just so we can track back at a later time when we have to fight this fight later. So I appreciate that, and I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. I was going to ask you my favorite question. Are you happy enough to move it? It's duly moved by Councillor Knoll. All those in favor? And all those opposed? It appears to carry, but we're getting lazy in our voting. I didn't actually see enough hands. I'll do it again. All those in favor? And any opposed? That was much smarter. Thank you very much. So now I need a motion to rise and report. Councillor Lapworth, thank you. Pardon? All right. All those in favor of the motion to rise and report? Smartly voted again. Thank you very much. That carries. I rise and report the Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on consent items 1, 2, and 3, public hearing items 4, 5, 6, and 7, discussion items 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. It's a premium on counting here tonight. Confidential discussion items C1, C2, C3, and C4, and advisory committee minutes item 15 as noted by the clerk. A mover and seconder for this report would be in order. Councillor Hutchins and Councillor Grant, thank you. All in favor? And the report is approved. Is there any new business to bring before council? Thank you. Is there perhaps a mover and seconder for consideration and reading of the bylaws, including the 2017-025, which has been revised? Councillor Chisholm, thank you. Councillor Hutchins, thank you. All those in favor? The bylaws are adopted. That completes our agenda, and very well done too, Council. And I thank you for your time and attention, and it's been great working with you. We are now adjourned.
Thank you.